Iranian state TV has aired what it called the first address from Iran's newly appointed supreme leader, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei. But the broadcast has raised questions about whether he's actually the author of the message and what his condition might be after he was injured in U.S. and Israeli attacks that killed his father, this previous supreme leader. The son of Ali Khamenei does not appear on camera. The message, vowing revenge for Iranian deaths and a lasting cutoff of Gulf oil supplies, was read by a TV presenter. Well, for more on this statement, we can speak now with Dr. Rowena Binti Abdul Razak. She's a lecturer in London, specializing in Middle Eastern history. Thanks for being with us. Rowena, what do you make of the statement from Iran's new supreme leader?
Thank you for having me. It's quite an interesting statement, especially from someone we cannot see and we cannot hear. It's a very strong statement and in many ways very much symbolic of the new hardline government that seems to be in place and that seems to be taking, that Mojtaba Khamenei represents. So even though he is not present, it is very much a statement that would have come from the more hardline elements in the government. He has very strong links with the IRGC, and the IRGC, as well as the Assembly of Experts, who are filled with more conservative and strong-handed members of the government, probably are behind this statement. So even though he himself didn't deliver it, it's more of a symbolic delivery of the system and the government that's in charge at the moment under Khamenei. I mean Khamenei Jr., as it were.
Yes, it seems to be a family dynasty now. Can we be sure that the statement really is from Mojtaba Khamenei? He hasn't been seen since the war started, and there is speculation that he's maybe in a coma or possibly even dead.
To begin with, Mojtaba was quite an enigmatic figure to begin with. He never held public office, so he was not someone who was in the public eye anyway. He was quite, a mysterious figure. Although we do know that he held a lot of power behind the scenes, he was very much the gatekeeper to his father back then when the father was alive. He also had very strong links with the IRGC and the Basij. So we know that he was very much a behind the scenes person. And even if the statement didn't come from him directly, it seems to be quite in line with how he was doing things anyway, very much behind the scenes, which in this context seems very strange because, the supreme leader is very much a public figure and needs to be seen. It's very hard to say whether the statement came from him directly, but I reckon that, and I believe that the statement was actually a collective effort, not just from him, but from the more hardline elements in the government, as I said, like the IRGC and so on.
Right.
There are lots of rumors of whether he's actually even alive, whether he is in a coma, how injured he is, and so on. And the fact that he hasn't been produced on TV speaks to the fact that either he is incapacitated in some way, or that they are very worried because there were lots of threats against his life. The US and Israel, and the US has said that he was not Trump's choice. Israel has said that they would kill any supreme leader that comes to power. So I think there is also a security element to him not appearing. But it doesn't breed much confidence among the government and its people.
Indeed. What sort of a reaction are you seeing so far from Iranians to this? How is the Iranian diaspora responding?
It's a disappointing appointment in many ways. He represents a dynasty, which is ironic because there were a lot of calls for the monarchy to return, Reza Pahlavi to return, and yet here now we have a clerical dynasty in charge in Iran. So it's kind of a disappointment to many. It's very hard to say what Iranians in Iran are really feeling. I mean, there were lots of state television videos showing, the support that Mojtaba has. But at the same time now with the blackout on the internet in Iran, it's very hard to know exactly the truth, to know exactly how people are feeling. Iranians at the moment are very displaced in Iran. The United Nations reckons about 3.2 million people are displaced in Iran. So there's a lot of unsettlement. There's a lot of chaos in the country. And I'm sure that a lot of people just want the war to be over.
Sure.
And at the moment, Mojtaba is not promising that. So I'm sure there's a lot of worry and concern that the war under him might just continue. The diaspora, of course, are not happy with his appointment because he continues in that hardline streak as his father. So a lot of people won't be necessarily happy with the direction that Iran seems to be going, more isolated, continuing in the hardline manner, not just in terms of the war, but against its own people as well.
So we've got that hardline message, but we haven't seen the new supreme leader ourselves or heard his voice. Can we still assume that the chain of command from the supreme leader on down is still intact, or could parts of the Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC, be operating pretty much on their own?
It's very possible. The IRGC, they have a new commander, Ahmad Vahidi, who was the former Minister of Defense, and he is known to be also very strong-handed, not just abroad, but also in the country. He used quite a lot of force against protesters, for example. And the IRGC, in a way, kind of acts on its own accord. As we can see, we have statements from the President Pezeshkian, who is trying to calm the situation. He's trying to calm down the Gulf neighbors, especially to say that, this is not against them. They've threatened to continue to hit at US bases and so on. So in terms of statements, they continue in this very hard line, but at the same time, the chain of command has taken quite a hit. Lots of IRGC commanders were killed. Lots of the military men have been killed. The Minister of Defense, just one day after his appointment, was also killed. At the moment, I don't believe that Iran even has a Minister of Defense. So the command structure is a little bit broken in some ways, but we do have a strong, strong leadership from Mojtaba, if he is alive in the background, and also the IRGC with Ahmad Vahidi, who is still in the background, and so on. So I think even though the chain of command is broken, the top echelons of power is still intact. We still have the president, we still have the assembly of experts, we still have the Guardian Council. So they are continuing, continuing behind the scenes. But I will say that we are seeing kind of two strands emerging, one more moderate, calling for negotiations, calling to make sure that that relations with the Gulf states are not broken, right, and another hand that still wants to continue the conflict.
Rowena, thank you very much for speaking with us today. That was Rowena Binti Abdul Razak, lecturer in the history of the Middle East and Africa in London.
For more on Iran's leadership change, we can now speak with Simon Mabon. He's a professor of international politics at Lancaster University in the UK. Simon, what do you make of that first statement that's attributed to Iran's new supreme leader?
Well, I think it tells us two things. One, it tells us that there is a very clear message that this is business as usual from the regime. And it tells us that the regime is trying to project this narrative that it is Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei who is the supreme leader. But it also raises questions because it is not the supreme leader who is reading this message, ostensibly his own message. It does raise the question about what condition is he in? Is he actually fit to appear live on TV? Is he alive, for that matter? So it raises a number of questions. But at the same time, it does send that narrative, that message of defiance to Israel, to the United States, and to other powers in world politics that Iran is still going to continue on its trajectory.
So Khamenei the Younger has not been seen since the war started, and there's speculation that he's in a coma or maybe no longer alive. This video, does that put a stop to speculations like that?
Not in the slightest. It does not, because it was not him. It does not end the speculation, of course. But I think that there are two things that maybe need to be taken into consideration here. The first is that if indeed he was not alive, then I would imagine that the Israelis and the Americans would have announced that pretty quickly, much like they did with the death of his father, Ali Khamenei. On the first day of the conflict, it was the Israelis, indeed, who declared declared that he had been killed, and it took the Iranians a good number of hours until they reached that point. So we've not heard that from the Israelis. We've not heard it from the Americans. But I would also imagine that the Iranians and the elite in the IRGC, and indeed those very, very close to Khamenei, would be keeping him incredibly safe, would be working very, very hard to protect him in light of the penetration of Iranian politics, in light of the penetration of Iranian security that we have seen over the past year or so, if not indeed longer, by the Mossad, by the Israelis and the Americans more broadly.
Now, presuming that he is alive and well, what can we expect from Iran under Mojtaba Khamenei's leadership then?
Well, those are a couple of very important assumptions, but I think what we can take out of it from what we know about Mojtaba Khamenei, he is someone that has a very hard line on politics, on his view of Iran's view in the region, the position in the region is very hard line. So it's similar to his father. But it also perhaps goes a little bit further than that. We know that Mojtaba has been responsible for orchestrating the repression of protesters in Iran over the past couple of months. Some have suggested that he was responsible for the killing of tens of thousands of people over the past 3 decades. So he's certainly got an iron fist. It remains to be seen if he has a velvet glove to wield as well. And what was telling from this message was that there wasn't a reference to the domestic situation in Iran. There's no narrative about the economic situation, but rather it is a projection of defiance. It is a narrative of resistance. And that, I think, is him leaning into this iron fist, if you will.
Now, I want to get your assessment of the current command structure in Iran. Do you think it is working as in top-down, or are parts of the Revolutionary Guards currently operating independently, maybe at least in part?
Well, I think my take on this is that after the 12-day war last June, we've seen the Iranians learning a great deal. We saw that they were decimated very, very quickly during that conflict. And I think that they've learned a lot of lessons from it. They've learned that they had to, in some ways, decentralize their command and control structures. They had to figure out ways of implementing strategy if those at the top had been taken out in a decapitation strategy, which we have seen the Israelis and the Americans try to do with the killing of Ali Khamenei, with the killing of the Minister of Defense and other leading figures in the political and military sectors. So I think the Iranians have learned a lot from that, and that involves giving a degree of autonomy, I would argue, to mid to higher level commanders in the military, in the IRGC, with a very clear plan for what to do in case more senior figures have been killed. And that's why I think we're seeing this continued bombardment of Israel, of US bases across the region, and we're seeing Iran continuing to respond to US and Israeli military actions and closing the Strait of Hormuz.
Simon Mabon there from Lancaster University in the UK. Many thanks for sharing your insight with us.
Thank you.